All right. Well, welcome back, everyone, to Stakeholder Meeting 4 and potentially our final stakeholder meeting before we go towards meeting with our electeds and having future discussions at gym meetings, as well as a whole long code update process. So we'll jump right into it. So we'll go for the agenda here. So it is an hour meeting. So this is about reconfirming a little bit of backing up for about 3 minutes on just where we've been, but really talking about fine-tuning our mitigation levels. And remember, this is your recommendation, so we don't have to have it right on, but sort of the general feel. And we'll spend most of the half an hour, maybe a half an hour or so on that. Then if we have time, we will check in on key policy decisions that you've alluded to, but they can be nuanced a little bit if we have time. And then lastly, we'll be really highlighting the recommendations that we'll be providing to the gym or guidance from the stakeholder group, celebrating all your great work. So that's what we have planned for the hour. We're going to be moving fast. So if we need to slow down, tell me. Otherwise, this is our pace. So got this timed out. All right. So where we've been. So you've worked on this prior to this. So clearly this is almost the second year. But in terms of making recommendations, we are in meeting 4. With meeting 1, just make sure our data was okay. Meeting 2, jumping in full force on recommendations. Meeting 3, refining those recommendations and jumping into policy. And then the last meeting here is sort of just confirmation. So we should be feeling generally good about where things are going. All right. So on that note, we are ready to go. I'm going to pass it off. And Ashley's never heard me talk this fast, but go ahead.
I thought I had 10 minutes to warm up. Okay, so in this next section, we're just revisiting our mitigation level discussion. But this time around, we're focusing more on the on-site build mitigation levels rather than the fees. So I just want that sort of framework in mind. And the two are related, of course, but we really wanted to bring the heart of the discussion back to the impact of new development on the need for workforce housing units. Next, please. Okay, and we want to just ground quickly the discussion with a quick reminder of what we're trying to do and what we're not trying to do. So we know the problem, and the Nexus study and the maximum mitigation levels help us understand the scale of the problem, but we need to come to some concurrence about the role the mitigation program should play. So when considering the mitigation levels, we have to remember that this program can't do it all. It can only address the extent to which new development contributes to job growth and then the need for housing. And we've discussed in the past that it would feel about right if the mitigation program were to contribute, about 1/3 of our supply of deed restricted, affordable workforce housing. This recognizes that we need to balance the need for new development, but then also the impact on local businesses, contribution from public subsidies and other programs, other public, private, nonprofit development, and the state legislative climate we're also keeping in mind. And we need to acknowledge that the less that new development mitigates its impact, the more that these other programs and subsidies and tools have to step up to fill that gap. So that's all the things that we're trying to keep in head as we have this conversation this afternoon. So before we get into the polling, which is really the heart of this section, we wanted to provide you with some ways of thinking about how to update the mitigation requirements. And you'll see these ideas expressed on the following polling slides. It's the exercise that we have in store. So these are some ideas, right? You can think about a future mitigation program that requires new development to mitigate 100% of our new 2023 Nexus-based maximums. We have those numbers, and that's one way of thinking about it. You can think about a recommended program that mitigates at 50% of the 2023 Nexus-based maximums, and that's similar in concept to what is in place right now. We're currently have a program that is requiring 50%. That was a policy decision that was made. Another way of thinking about it is to aim to keep the mitigation requirements approximately the same as where we are right now. And as a percentage of the 2023 maximums, that would vary, right? But it's more of like a anchoring to where we are right now. Or there may be some other way of thinking about it that we can discuss as we move through the following slides. So at the last meeting, a really interesting idea came up. We talked about it a bit before, but it really got some traction, I think, last time. The idea that we could merge the commercial categories into one consolidated category. And we did run those numbers. And if we combine office, retail service, restaurant, bar, industrial, and institutional recreation amusement, that mitigation comes out to 8 units per 10,000 square feet of development. So a little lower than the office and the retail service, but higher than the institutional and the industrial. And the way to think about some of these, so you see, none all the way over to the left, full mitigation at 8 units per 10,000 square feet of development over to the right. And if you want to think, just as an example, that new restaurant bar development, you can see it there at that 75% mark. Currently in the town, it is required to mitigate at a rate of 6 units of workforce housing per 10,000 square feet of new development. So 6 as a percentage of 8 is 75%. That's why you see that restaurant bar there at the 75%. So we went through that math for each of these categories just to give you a sense of how the merged commercial category relates to where we are right now with respect to the full mitigation. So before we get into the polling on this particular question, this one's a little bit unique. We're curious, are you comfortable with all the commercial uses mitigating at the same rate under a merged commercial category? And we've talked a bit about this before, but just as a reminder, the benefit, it completely eliminates the change of use concerns between the different commercial uses, which reduces the impact on businesses and simplifies the, already have a thumbs up, okay. And simplifies the code administration. The drawback is that it really removes the nuance that different uses have higher employee impacts, different wage and occupation profiles than others. So curious to hear, I'll turn it over to Bruce to sort of facilitate this conversation, but curious to hear thoughts on that.
Yeah, if anyone wants to start here, I mean, this is a big decision. This is where we're going to spend most of our time. So on this question, especially if we like this idea of this aggregated grouping, which has some benefits in terms of simplifying things. So let's start off with, does anyone look at this and say, no way, let's keep it all separate?
And I will just before we did decide to keep lodging separate, right, in recognition of the differences of that category. Another idea, it came up in some conversations, is to maybe also pull out industrial from this, because it's really in its own, we don't have the change of use concerns because the industrial uses belong in their own or are developed in their own zone. So you can weigh in on that as well as you share your thoughts.
I have a question. And if they were all to be aggregated, it seems like the losers, so to speak, the ones that would have much higher mitigation would be industrial. And restaurant bar would be sort of the winner because it would be less. And so I guess I don't quite understand the chart. Are the orange dots or the lighter color dots, that's currently what's required? And the proposed is what?
So there is nothing on here that is proposed. That's really the question that we're asking of you. The orange dots are trying to indicate what the reduction would need to be in order to keep the mitigation level the same as it is right now.
Yeah, so Rob, if you were to look at this and go, we already kind of did this a little bit with the fee, but if in terms of units, if you're to look at this and go, if I were to move, I think retail, office, and so on should be around 50%. You'd move those to the right. So that's, sort of 4 units. And restaurant bar, we were saying before, are we hitting the small ones too hard? So you'd move that one to the left, for example.
If they all merged at 50%, so to speak.
Yeah, and they don't have to. It was interesting. Wendy, there was a chart that went out which said how many units for mitigation, and if you're at a 4, you're below even the mitigation levels, the maximum mitigation levels in the old 2013 study, and even the new one. So even if you were at that 4, which is the middle, you're still below that. If you're at 5, you can cross some of the categories, but it's pretty tempered but good. But I'll say it's definitely I think Wendy can jump in here, but it's pretty tempered if you were to start to squish them towards that middle.
Yeah. So the objective. So basically, the orange circles, we took a look at what's currently required for number of units for each of these categories, and said. And that's what these orange circles are representing, so restaurant bar, as Ashley said, currently requires that you do 6 units.
Which is 75% of its actual generation.
Yeah. Exactly, of the generation of the merged commercial categories. Okay. So the merged commercial category, by merging restaurant, bar, retail service, office, and industrial together, the mitigation rate of all of those combined, the full mitigation rate would be 8 employees per 10,000 square feet.
I see. That's
8 housing units.
The average, if you just, because restaurant bars is probably higher than 8 and the other ones are lower.
Exactly. So the maximum you could require of restaurant bar is much higher than 8. It's just the current code set the required units at 6.
Okay.
And so that's all we're mapping here, is showing you where the current code falls for each of these mitigation rates that are currently in the code compared to the 8.0 maximum for the merged category.
In the 2023 study. Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
So currently retail service has its own category is 27% of the current study.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a feel for what actually happens in these categories? What's the scale of any of these in our community? Like who's building what, such that if the objective is to get more housing built, if restaurant and bar, which Tyler says not getting built because the mitigation is so high, and industrial is low. I mean, what's getting built? I guess it's probably.
Yeah, does anybody know of any true new commercial stuff other than, the Glenwood project or hotels?
The Arts District has some.
That's got some mixed use.
Yeah.
It's got some commercial.
That's but like retail though. Top, most of it's retail or office.
Yeah, they kept it cheaper.
So
but that's still tied in with some high-end stuff, right?
Yeah.
If we combined all of these and we made the recommendation of mitigating at 6 per 10,000 square feet, it would put additional pressure on retail service office developments, and it would make restaurant development more attractive. Is that a summary?
Agreed. Yeah. And I think that, like you said, the winner in this would be the restaurant bar, but I don't know if I'm willing to trade the loser of retail office to get a winner in the restaurant bar either.
Well, that's it. And that's why there's not many opportunities for restaurant bar, and there's more opportunities for retail service office, taking it to 5 might actually generate more housing in town, because realistically, nobody's going to build a restaurant. But I do like I think most things are going to be renovations, right? A change of use. And the simplification for that, I think, does help our community's small businesses. I would be in favor of taking out industrial, because you're right, it's very much its own category and it's so much lower. And so, I think if we're somewhere in maybe we don't go to 6, maybe we go to 5 or something and keep them combined.
All right, let's get a few more. Anyone else look at this and go, because we'll do the polling in the second, and we can do industrial separately if you'd like. But let's start with anyone opposed to aggregation, and then I'll ask you about industrial.
What do you think this ends up at a price per foot for a fee if you ended up not having a full unit?
Oh my gosh, I wish I had those pulled up. I'll go pull them up. We did the fee piece of it last time, and then I wanted to bring it back because the development costs have just increased so much in the last little bit of time. It sort of skewed the discussion away from mitigation. The fees are significant, especially on the retail restaurant bar.
You know, I think if we're going to revisit that in policy recommendation, I think we're really spiking on development costs. I think there is going to be some pullback. Lumber costs are coming down, and it would be a tricky time right now to sort of pinpoint that as the mitigation. We may want to consider a percentage of that, given where I think it's very, very peaky right now in the build out from COVID. And other pressures are going to be lower the demand for construction, and the increase in interest rates, and it all has this lag time.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's just food for thought on that.
Sky, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I'm still trying to understand this chart, and I'm looking at the packet on page 4 with the mitigation comparison commercial.
Yeah.
Seems like the 2013 numbers are fairly similar to the 2023 numbers, and the 2018 and 21 kind of went off in different directions, but we're kind of back to the 13. So I guess when I look at the new numbers, it looks like office and retail service restaurant are very close, 8.8 and 9.8, which is a bit surprising because in the last few years, office has been so much lower. So it seems like we just had, some kind of bad math. And now if we believe in these new numbers, then like lumping office, retail service restaurant makes sense from a numbers perspective. And so, yes, it makes things worse for office because they've been underpaying, but if that's what the numbers are, then it seems fair to lump those all together. They're pretty close anyway. So, that just seems like a reasonable thing to do. And then there's no change of use, and that's helpful for people basically across the sectors. So that all seems like a reasonable thing to do. It does seem like lodging should be separate for multiple reasons, and industrial as well. And I don't know about institutional recreation, amusement. That kind of seems like a different animal where like you're less likely to be doing change of use there, but kind of curious what others think on that one.
All right, so what we've heard so far is pull out industrial, but momentum is pushing towards this aggregation of use. Again, this is just a recommendation to be forward. We're not sure where we'll end up, and we haven't decided on the numbers yet. So we're still staying on that same question on, are we okay with answering this question? And do you understand it? Even though it's the simplest graph I've ever seen that you have to stare at it a long time.
I have a quick question to help understand it a little better. Is the difference in the chart that was just being referenced on page 4, is the difference in the housing mitigation requirement per 10,000 square feet, is that due mainly to job creation per 10,000 feet, or portion of those new jobs that earn enough money that they can potentially get into market rate housing?
It's both. So when we're just comparing the aggregate number of units per 10,000 square feet, it's about the job density assumptions, which weren't all that different, a little bit of difference, but they weren't all that different from the 2013 study. That's why we're seeing those sort of similarities. Where we're getting variation is in the occupation distribution and the wages. And, we're only targeting those units up, or those households that are earning up to 160%. Those are the units in our mitigation program. So it's both of those. It's both of those things. And that occupation and wage distribution, I think, has changed the more significantly than employment density.
Understood. I think that's a good argument for combining them too, because you're not relying as heavily on those stats kind of being those percentages being static over time too. And you're not, continuing with the assumption that office workers twice as likely to be able to afford market rate housing.
Any other comments? I mean, I'm assuming if you're on this one, if you're not speaking up, you're kind of going with the flow here, and you're agreeing, and put it that way.
I came in a bit late, guys. Give me the simplest definition of that number 8.0. What's that mean?
So what we've done here is we've taken the commercial land use categories except for lodging. We pulled that out and we ran through our model to say, if you merge all these commercial land use categories except for lodging, in order to mitigate 10,000 square feet of new development, you would need to provide 8 units of workforce housing.
Thank you. It's just units. That's what I thought, but okay, thanks.
Yep.
Oh, units. Is that what you said, Anna?
Yep, just units.
Okay.
And this is Rick, and I didn't speak up because I was the first one to put my thumbs up on this. Well, I think balancing that out and moving it to the so that everything's similar. It's kind of what we talked about in another meeting as well. I just think it makes sense, and I agree with Rob's comments as well.
Okay, so we are going to pull on industrial separate. And then we are going to pull on an aggregate here to try to figure out a number and see where people land. So it's www.menti.com. And then there's the code. And we're going to see how this goes. This is the big challenge this is the hard part for today. So, or at least what I think is the hard part. And I'm counting, I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is that how much you, Kelly? Is my math right? 7 votes. You always want to be the first person because you set the tone for everyone else. So. Okay, so we got people looking for more, not quite the maximum on a lot of these, but more towards fuller mitigation. Okay, and then one person will pretty much keep it the same. So like where it is.
With this category, there isn't that much of a keep it the same because it's a brand new merged category. So
true. So the correct. Good point. All right, so 2 more people. And maybe if you haven't voted yet or polled yet, I'll probably ask you to turn on your, to go ahead and speak up, why not? Okay, so 1 more. Okay, who are we missing? So Anna, Melissa, Rob, all good. Sky, Tyler, Josh, good. Process elimination here. Okay, we're going to go with what we've got right now. So it's a little bit down the middle here. So let's start with the left-hand side. So if you were down in the number of units below the 4 level, Do you want to jump in here? So the dots to the left, essentially.
That was me. I get where everybody's coming from. I just don't want to punish the retail service to help the restaurant. So I was kind of bringing it down to the lower level there. Still would like to see what that cost per foot is, but I think everybody knows my stance has been the higher fees creates less of the development.
All right, and then we've got another dot there right beside that 31% below the 50%. Or Tyler, was that your no? That you would have done only one.
I think that probably was mine, and I would say my thoughts were similar to Tyler's.
And do you want to restate those, Melissa?
Again, not wanting to punish the retail office so much, as Tyler said, and perhaps being able to encourage a little bit more restaurant bar.
Gotcha. So pulling it down. And then let's go to the far right. That's 75%, like right in the middle there. Whose dot is that?
That's me.
Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the numbers, if the actual number for restaurant in 2013 was 19.8, and then it averages down with retail and service to 9.8, and we're talking full mitigation is 8. You know, if it's actually 20 and we're talking 6, that seems like a pretty small percentage of the, you know, what actual full mitigation would be. So it seems like if we bring everyone else up, then you've got a number that, you know, you're still getting some mitigation that's very far from full. It's probably something like 30% of what actual full mitigation would be. So it doesn't seem like a punishment. On the other hand, I also want to see what these mean translated into fees, because if it turns out that you know, 6 units turns into $500 and that makes it impossible to do anything, then, you know, I don't think that makes sense after all. But sort of in the abstract, when we're talking about number of units,
right,
looking at the actual impact, that seems fair.
I mean, in some ways, what you're saying, Sky, is that it's already based on the fact that it's aggregated. It's already being, it's less than full mitigation already, and less than what's current. So we're not really punishing retail, restaurant, we're actually helping them. Even at that level that you put it there, but it does matter on what the fee is. So how, you know, people, if in terms of a recommendation, and I'm trying to look at this is if we were to represent this as we go forward of somewhere in the middle ground, would that be disingenuous to people? You know, back to Tyler, you know, of coming, you know, not wanting to punish one versus the other, but coming towards the middle. But you know, clearly with with units on the far left and units on the far right, you know, it kind of accomplishes the goal of some coming right, you know, hate to say it, coming towards that 4 units overall.
I think for me, I'd like to see what that cost per foot is. My guess is it's probably going to end up being what,
pretty high,
100-ish or something, based on some former numbers that we were talking about.
Yeah, so maybe if this helps from last time, you know, office, when we were looking at it just in its own, not in this merged category, the number of households that we were trying to mitigate was around 8.8, right? That would have been the maximum mitigation. That was translating to a fee per square foot of $447. And that's very, you know, that is really varying by our occupation and wages. So that will change a little bit with this merged category. We didn't calculate the fee for that yet. Easy to do if there's direction to move forward with the merged category. The retail service restaurant at 9.6 households, that's where you really got the distribution of the lower waged households. And so it ups the fee. And that one was at $620 a square foot. Industrial was down at $294 a square foot, lodging at $367, institutional recreation amusement at $220. Those were the maximums based on the individual household generation. Household generation of each of those categories.
So that was based on 100% mitigation.
Correct.
And so I think the other thing to bear in mind here is that office under the current orange dot is underrepresented from the current Nexus study. And so to look at a weighted average sort of between them, office really should be higher even under the reduced mitigation of previous policy, right, if the current calculation was higher. And so I think the merging simplifies for everyone. We don't want to hurt the retail service. Those build outs are less expensive than restaurant bar. Restaurant bar is a very expensive build out. Anyway, it's tricky. When you say the $400 a square foot or whatever the answer is that based on they don't build anything? They just send a check to the housing authority.
Correct. It's not assuming any sort of hybrid response to the requirement.
I think if there was a policy opportunity to create incentive for people to solve for their own housing than writing a check, I don't know what incentives can be built into that. And then also, what flexibility in zoning or whatever can be given. If people can put housing on property, would be very beneficial to our community. But
yeah, that's built in. I mean, it's definitely writing the check is discouraged in the code, and we can add in the comments of looking for clearly incentives to be able to build.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Tyler, I'm trying to push us towards a little bit so we can make a recommendation on this one. I'm trying to push it towards the middle, as my goal is. And is that an unrealistic goal for today?
I don't know if I can get to the middle. I hate to be the problem child here. I like the idea of simplifying it, but like, here it is, it's simple no matter which one of these you do. But if it was like, make a decision, either merge them to 50% or keep them separate, I would rather keep them separate and keep the restaurant higher to not, because if you added up how many places in town are office and retail, add those up versus the restaurant, it's probably pretty lopsided. So I think we end up helping restaurant bar, but then you hurt more than a 1-for-1 and a number of units throughout the town that are offices and retail. So I don't know if I can get to the 50% right in the middle there, but.
As a reminder, I think we had already talked about merging retail, service, restaurant, right? So all the numbers we talked about before did combine those categories. We weren't pitting the sort of retail service against the restaurant bar for this very reason, right? We decided to merge those. So I think really what we're trying to show with those orange dots is just how they compare to what the current program is, but already we've been talking about merging them. And the mitigation for that combined retail, service, restaurant was the maximum, 9.6 housing units per 10,000 square feet of development.
So maybe to provide more information on the recommendation. This is good. It allows us, we're not going backwards, probably going a little bit forward, which is good, at least in terms of units and so on. That we can go ahead and pull on the individual categories, but Ashley's right, some of them are already grouped and so on. And then use the remainder of our time to quickly look at a summation of some of the other recommendations. So in this one, it's going to be fast though. So you have to think on your feet, but it will be in the record. So we're going to move forward here and get ready. So we're going to do them individually, even though lodging was already separate. So
so this is lodging. In order to keep the requirement where it is right now, you would need to be at 37% of the 2023 max. We have this additional sort of shadow dot, which is trying to kind of recall back for all of you what we believe we heard from you in a prior discussion too. So just additional context.
Okay, so you have the advantage of where you voted on fee before. and then meeting 2 results. So this is lodging. So let's go ahead and jump into polling. Poll mitigations at 5.4 units. This is individual.
And you're saying 37% is to maintain where we're at right now, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so we got our first one in, pretty consistent. Maintain, slightly improve. All right, appreciate the speed here. All right, so just state the obvious, more on the right-hand side of heading towards fuller mitigation. But again, all this will be documented in terms of, including leaving it the same or currently maintaining what we have. We're going to keep on going here. So, but same thing, we had 7 votes this time. We're going to do it even faster in this next one. So let's go ahead and move. So industrial, we said we were going to pull out anyways. Well, mitigation's at 5.4, and we're way down there on the 22%.
Bruce, could you give some examples of industrial uses we might be familiar with?
Right. And maybe I'll ask for, I'll phone a friend if April or Paul's on some of the areas on the edge of town. Paul, do you want to throw one in?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. That's fine. Yeah, good question. I mean, normally what we'd be talking about is really light industrial. That's what we call it industrial. It'd be like spaces for contractors, plumbers, electricians, could be car repair shops, could be some kind of painting establishments, any business that has some hazardous materials could be it, but doesn't have to have hazardous materials. A lot of it has to do kind of with the building trades, and we have a very limited number of places where those building trades are actually allowed. So they're usually allowed in our industrial park, our business park, what we call business park zoning. It does not allow any kind of retail, some heavy service uses. Again, that's like a car mechanic type place. Warehousing, if you're storing a lot of different materials, warehousing. So those are and the manufacturer, a brewery, just to use a recent one, Roadhouse Breweries down there, that technically counts the production of beer. Another example of a light industrial use.
Basically all of Gregory Lane.
Yeah, that's our one spot for it. Yeah.
Since you brought up beer, no one wants to punish anyone making beer, Paul. So thanks for that. Well, actually, we're rewarding the workers. So that's good.
How does that work for like a construction, a general contractor's office that's 90% laid down yard? Is it just the square footage of the office building?
Yeah, so if it's like a contractor's yard, storage materials, all that kind of thing, we have like roofing companies, we have down there. That would also, those would be light industrial uses. You can run and have an office space in there. What we say is that office space just has to be incidental to the main use. I mean, even running a car repair shop, you still have to have an office place where records, answer the phone, that kind of thing. That's all fine. You just can't have office as a primary use, but you can always have an office to help run the primary business. And yeah, there's some judgment calls about how much office that is, and we have to make those calls, but I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Okay, so we're only missing one more person. Do you want me to pause for a second and give you a shot here? All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to move on because the clustering was pretty close here. I'm glad that was done separately. Same thing for office. So we'll be able to use this data compared to, look, we like the idea of aggregation, but this allows us, Ashley definitely was interested in also the individual ones, just in case this is more of interest for our electeds to take this path. Wow, all right.
Oh, you're getting so good.
All right, our first cluster, so. We're gonna have the one rebellious, yeah, there we go. Tyler, was that you? It's I'm gonna give you your own color.
Yeah, I'll continue to be the outlier here.
Well, you're not going to none, so we
yeah. I mean, I'm not all the way there.
All right, so we're gonna move on here for time here, and here's the one we've been waiting for: retail service restaurant. So you have your fee rating there before, pulling it down a little bit. And that seemed to be, yeah, this one will be interesting. So I'll hold my comments. So meeting 2 was not having fees that are too high, but if they're building units, a little more spread. All right. Okay, and I believe we're getting close to the last few here. This one's a tough one. Paul, do you want to? It includes institutional, but if you want to throw an example of this one, this one I find tough in terms of an example. So
yeah, institution. Yeah, it is kind of a catch-all category, kind of oddball sometimes uses, but could be anything from large governmental offices, or could be a rec center to a water treatment plant to a fire station. Could be any kind of new park related, amusement type things. Gyms, I think, are included in this, recreation amusement, like a new gym, any kind of gym, which we see quite a bit here. A theater, a movie theater, we had a new one of those. So it's kind of an oddball. It tends to be kind of large buildings that are maybe don't have as many employees per square foot.
Right, hence the mitigation 3.8. So
yeah, the 3, that tells you that.
And Paul, isn't a lot of this independent calculations for even parking and all that normally?
Yeah, so yeah, you've dealt with this. So yeah, this is that catch-all category. It's so broad that we used to have a one-size-fits-all parking, and we said, well, it didn't work so great, so we went to independent calculation, which then confuses everybody, sometimes including planners, and creates a lot of work. So we're consolidating in these and giving it a number. So I think there'll be less independent calculations because this category is here to capture. It's not a perfect category because it's very broad, but we're in the interest of simplification and simplicity, we're trying to create a category for all these and kind of live with the lack of maybe precision in some sense.
Yeah, I think the goal is to move away from the independent calculation as much as possible.
Yeah, which staff appreciates as well.
Yeah, I know, Paul, you guys want to stay away from it more black and white, but I do agree this is the one where sometimes it does need an independent calculation. Not all 10,000 square foot amusement institutional have the same number of employees. They could be drastically different.
And Tyler, probably that would always be an option, right? If you were developing something in this category and you felt the number didn't apply to you for some reason, in almost every code, there's some sort of way of like making an argument, providing your own analysis, something. But it wouldn't be the town or the county that's doing it. You'd be kind of trying to make a case for yourself.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Just a quick question for Paul. I've heard people say how government buildings are exempt and the government's not doing the mitigation. Is that true, or does this category include like if the town or county are building something, they have to pay mitigation?
Yeah, good question. And I'd have to rely on some of the other people. I think we have a recommendation for government buildings in terms of exemptions. I forget where we are on that, maybe.
Yeah, we are at, I'll go ahead, Wendy.
Yeah, so there's a current recommendation that now wants to include institutional public uses as having to mitigate, but at a reduced rate. So, perhaps, so if you did like the merge category at say a value of 4, maybe the public uses would only have to mitigate at 2 or something like that. And so that's the current recommendation, is just basically to include them, but at a reduced rate from what others would be. The reason for that is one, recognizing that most of them are providing some of their own housing. The second caveat to that is that they also, you guys also indicated you want to give them credit for housing that they have already provided. So a lot of the uses like the hospital, who's had housing for what, 15, 20 years, the objective would be that they could then, apply the housing they already have to credit if warranted, if they add any more space. Okay.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It feels like government should have to lead by example, and it would be kind of weird for the town and county to say, hey, we're increasing mitigation rates, but we're cutting our own. I just think that would be a bad look. So it seems like there's other ways, like you just mentioned with the credits, or they've already, they're doing housing, like all of that could fit in where they have the same requirement, and then those decrease the additional burden in practice. But I would be uncomfortable with giving government a break when government is making everyone else do more.
Yeah, and this is Rick Howe, and I in one of our previous meetings we kind of talked very similar to that fact. Is optics is everything going into some of this stuff, and for us to make it at least seem like that it is a fair approach, I think is good on everybody. Yeah,
I think that's been noted, of looking to see if they can house their, do it, provide some housing to meet that. So that's definitely, we'll note that and take that into account. So whether it has to be a one-to-one, same as a commercial entity. So we're going to keep on moving here. So, oh, go ahead. Yeah. Sorry to me to cut you off.
No, it's April. Don't worry about it. Keep going.
Oh, it's April on the 307. Hi, April.
Hey, I'm on the move. But go ahead, please.
All right, so we're going to jump. We've got a few more here, and then we're going to do a summary of recommendations. But we're seeing a push towards most of the commercial uses to a slightly higher percentage than what we currently have. Some people staying the same, but slightly higher. Generally, that push is what we're seeing. So, and that seems to be pretty consistent. So that's where we are through that exercise. With the goal of trying to consolidate something we're gonna have to work on offline for recommendations. Multifamily is one where we talked about before. You have the benefit of your polling results before, where is multifamily providing some housing in some ways. So that's why you're seeing that polling 2 results where it is, where it was pulled down a little bit.
And just confirming, this is multifamily is all long-term, right? The short-term stuff goes in the lodging category, correct?
Correct. So you're kind of hitting it, remember, with 2 ways. You hit it with fees, now you're hitting it with units. So be able to cross-tabulate those results.
Sorry, can you explain that? Where was the divide between fees versus units?
Just that you've hit it through the lens of fees before with that gray circle, and now you're looking at it if you were to build it with units. So
Understood. Gotcha.
We'll see if sometimes there'll be a relationship, sometimes as well. Priority is clearly building, but a lot of people clustering right very close to where it was before. Let's get a few more in here before we move on here. All right, and I'm going to close it in about 30 seconds. And I think we understand the one dot to the far left. So multifamily is providing housing, if that's correct. So, all right, we're going to move on. So this one is settled here. It's mitigation of single family, but in this case for the town. And you did pull with fees for residential before as it related to the county, but it's how much residential mitigate of their impact.
And was there a threshold that was over square footage for this?
Yeah, 2,500.
So this mitigation, what we're voting on is any square footage over 2,500.
Currently,
this is in the town,
yeah.
Whereas the exemption applies in the county.
Okay, so this is even somebody builds a 1,200 square foot small house, they're still paying. Okay.
No, they're not paying.
They're not.
If it's under 2,500, they don't pay anything.
In the town they do, in the county they don't. The town does not have the de minimis exemption for single family. Now that being said, if you want to add one, that can be a recommendation from you guys.
I would definitely like to add that. I think having a threshold under 25 should be 0. And then after that, I mean, again, I think we all agree an 8,000 square foot house should be much more than a 2,000 square foot house.
Since that is one of the questions that we have, does anyone disagree with that for the town of adding that exemption?
I fully support that. It's Rob.
Okay.
I fully support it.
I support that too.
Wow.
And
all right.
I think 100% full mitigation after that exemption makes a lot of sense.
Sky, were you high-fiving or were you asking a question?
I think I'm the outlier in that one. That, if you're looking at a 2,000 square foot home and construction costs of $500 a square foot, that's $1 million home. So the folks we're talking about who need housing and are making under 160% are nowhere near affording $1 million construction project on a piece of land that's probably $1 to $2 million. So I feel like even though it's a small-ish house, you're still talking a multi-million-dollar project, which is not providing housing for the people we're talking about housing. So I love the idea of scaling it or having, maybe a break point where it's significantly higher, but I guess I don't see anybody able to do a single family home in the moderate income range we're talking about.
I mean, that's definitely going to come up, Sky, as we move forward on this. Does anyone want to second what Sky said?
I would say a lot of people that are right at that margin, they're not buying lots. They either have lots, have family lots, whatever it is, and pretty minimal housing mitigation fees can be the difference between them being able to build and not. And it's also, can get into remodels and additions and things like that, where they really could be, upper middle class, longtime residents that are doing that, and staying under that 2,500 limit is the difference between being able to build their house and not.
Gotcha. All right. So just that outlier, but a noted outlier definitely will be revisited as we move forward. So last chance, if you haven't voted on this one.
Sorry, I've got one question.
Yeah,
and it just came from the conversation that just happened.
Sure.
Because of the kind of maybe the income of people who are building. What about Alta?
You mean
Alta currently gets a
more affordable?
25% deduction or reduction, I believe, from any of the current requirements.
Anna, did that answer your question? Sort of?
Yeah, it answered the question. I was just curious what people thought.
Yeah,
And I'm curious.
It's a good note for us to put in the notes about that to make sure we don't forget that it may be slightly different. So go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, just a quick question based on Josh's comment. Does mitigation apply to a remodel?
If you go over it. So I know in the county, if you start with an 1,800 square foot house, and I forget if it's only the portion that goes over, but if you start with an 1,800 square foot house, do an addition renovation that pushes you over the threshold, then you pay it. And maybe you only pay it on the portion over, but I believe
you pay it for the whole thing.
You pay it for the whole thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Correct. Yeah. Well, and so this was the other caveat that, was of potential suggestion. If you're considering an exemption, a de minimis exemption, is there one that you should consider for additions? So, if an addition is, under 500 square feet or 300 square feet or a percentage of the size of the unit, perhaps they don't have to do any mitigation. And so that was kind of the Paul might chime in, but, the idea of a local adding a bedroom or something like that.
Yeah, I might chime in because I think that was one of the staff comment, something we see a lot, and increasingly with increased land values, construction costs, people are, I'll use the word, kind of trapped in whatever they live in. That's kind of where they're at, because a lateral move or a move up is almost impossible, or for some people. And so they're like, well, I guess I'm living in the thing I got now because it's what I have. And so they're looking for ways to make it work for expanding families, mother, dad, moving back, whatever. They're thinking long-term about something that they probably thought they would live in for 5 years. And so my thought was, why penalize somebody who's reinvesting in existing housing stock, not tearing it down, but reinvesting in it. They're, we'll assume they're locals for the most part. It'd be nice to have it's hard for us to say, hey, you're adding a bedroom because you had a third kid and you owe us $5,000-$6,000, and they're going, what? I am the workforce. Well, yes, but still has an impact. So that was sort of our thought, and I'd be curious what other people think.
I think it's a great idea. Is there a way to confirm their workforce, and then that allows them to apply for the de minimis exemption?
This is Rick. That's kind of where I was thinking as well. Is as long as there's a way to, if you will, just vet it and make sure that it's accurate. I agree with providing benefits really to people that can prove they are going to live in it and they are working here.
So we'll note that and see, that would be something that are these nuances, we're hitting at the high level, but these are all, we're not going to lose this information in terms of these recommendations to be able to consider as we move into our other discussions in the code. So that's a great suggestion. So let's move on. We've got I think this is our last one. Is this right, Kelly, on this? And then we're going to go to a recommendations table. If people could say just about 10 minutes long, we will be able to complete our task for today. So this one is the same question. So this should be your easiest question of the day. Because last time it was town. This we already know about the exemption. So this should be pretty much your same thing you voted last time, maybe, but we'll see. It's like stats. If you do it enough, you'll get patterns, right? Or those profile tests about your personality where you think if you take it 10 times, it'll change and suddenly you'll be more interesting. I'm gonna keep trying, so. All right, so we're gonna last shot here and we're gonna move on. I think we're down to, now we lost Melissa there, so. Okay, so wow, like the dot to the right. Didn't think you could do that, but it's full, it's above full mitigation, so like it. All right, people are getting sporty here. If we can go right to the table, that would be great. So that's the information that we needed. The other subjects we did cover, or we talked about them. The plan forward is for us to send out a recommendation table with, and I think we'll add a column with caveats of, you know, some people thought, or other people thought, which would be, you know, sort of below other considerations. And we'll send that around, and we'll definitely probably rely on, we'll use Ryan's guidance on who you need to talk to make sure that you're comfortable with the language, because this is what we'll be forwarding to the gym as your recommendation. Now, recommendation doesn't mean consensus. It means here's the general spirit of the group. And generally they were pushing this way. However, there was these comments as well. And so we will do our best to capture those in a table like this. So I'm gonna start with the question, I'm gonna start with the question that, are you okay with that format if we go ahead and circulate this, and then you have the ability to engage either Ryan or Wendy or someone in terms of, hey, if you would change the wording to this or add this following point, a table such as this would be forwarded to the gym. Is everyone okay with that sort of format of recommendation? Okay, awesome. Yeah. Well, we appreciate it. You know, there's a lot of thought, a lot of information coming out of this group. And then the general recommendations that you're seeing there are essentially the results of your polling exercises and your discussions related to policy. So, just some of those examples in terms of the general recommendations, knowing that we probably need to add in a couple of these subtleties to make sure that people are comfortable, is continuing with, you know, encouraging people to construct first and fee second, is one of those. The idea of change of use, of trying to remove that by consolidating categories together. So we've already done that a little bit already, but also trying to move towards that goal of actual consolidation of those commercial categories, aside from industrial and lodging. Housing credits, to only credit for space that was required to mitigate already. So those that didn't mitigate before, they would not get credit for that. So if you have already got credit or mitigated, then you would get credit only. So that would be a change. I'm gonna stop on that one. Does everyone understand that one? And Wendy, do you want to restate that one?
Sure. Yeah, so the housing credits we discussed, basically the bulk of the group was comfortable with only allowing credit for space that was required to mitigate in the past. So any building that was built, for example, prior to 1995, someone was coming in and you know, redeveloping or tearing down and rebuilding new, they would not get credit for that space because it didn't have to mitigate in the past. They'd have to mitigate for the whole thing. Caveat to that is when drafting the policy, don't discourage necessary redevelopment. So be sensitive in the policy to still, you know, to not discourage redevelopment from happening. And there's definite others that have done such things in their code. This one was also interesting because there was a lot of discussion around, well, if change of use does not change. So in other words, if change of use stays in place, that this recommendation to credit only for space that was required to mitigate might change from this group. recognizing that if businesses still have to mitigate through change of use, you want them to get as much credit as possible for the new space that they're moving into, regardless of when it was built. So that was kind of, this one was a bit of a complicated one.
Yep.
Can I ask a question on that? If somebody buys an older hotel that was built before 1994, whatever, and they just remodel it, would that remodel trigger full mitigation as if they built it, tore it down and built it ground up?
Today, no. And perhaps Paul can talk to that more than I can.
But the recommendation that we put forward would say, if you just remodel an existing use, that would trigger mitigation on it.
Potentially. And that's what I was going to say. For example, what Telluride does is if you're just remodeling an existing one and not tearing it down, then you still get credit for the existing space. Mm-hmm. If you tear it down, mm-hmm. then you do not. So there's caveats. So that's what I mean. There's nuances you can do to this one to not discourage redevelopment, but yet, not allow a hotel on one site to tear down a hotel on another site and claim credit for it.
Right. I think that the drawback of may impact desired redevelopment, I think that it may impact desired renovations mm-hmm. as opposed to redevelopment. And I think that distinction needs to be made. If you want to renovate something, I don't think you should be penalized. If you want to completely redevelop it, and where does that distinction become one or the other? Okay. But I think that that's a fine line, because we don't want stuff to go into disrepair because it's too burdensome to just simply freshen it up. What's a renovation versus a redevelopment?
Yeah, I can jump in. This is Paul again. To Rob's point, under current rules, anyways, a rehabilitation or redevelop or a remodel would not trigger housing mitigation in almost all cases. If you have a 40-unit hotel and you remodel it, as long as you keep the number of rooms the same, and it all depends on what is the unit of measurement that mitigation is based on. Is it just square footage? In which case you can remodel all you want, as long as you don't add any square footage. If you add square footage, you just mitigate, for the additional square footage. If it's by units, which is what hotels are, they're based on the number of units. As long as you don't change the number of units, you can put as much money into the same 40 units as you want, or reduce them, make them bigger, which a lot of people do when they remodel. They tend to make things higher end, so they actually reduce the number. The density goes down, that's fine. There's no consequence. So, but I do think if for some reason in all of this, we're thinking of changing that, we should make that clear. I would tend to support that. We should not do that as staff. I think people should not be penalized for reinvesting, in existing buildings and keeping them up.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I think that wording needs to be somehow have a carve out for renovating and keeping your property in good condition. Any business needs to reinvest.
And then just one more, because we've talked about everyone else. Wendy, do you want to just, since you're on a roll here, hit the MFI range?
Sure. Yeah. So what we talked about, the current policy currently requires for mitigation that units be built across a range starting at less than 50 to 80% AMI, 80 to 120. All of those would be both employment restricted as well as income and price restricted. And then it also requires a 120 and above, which would be your workforce deed restriction, which just requires that it be occupied by someone working locally. We discussed a shift to this to potentially require instead a less than 80% level, an 80 to 120 and a 120 to 160, all of which would require a workforce restriction as well as a price and income cap. Two goals. One is to focus more on the primary units needed by employees in the community and by the businesses. And then number two, also recognizes that other programs are producing units at some of these different levels, like your 2-for-1 incentive program is producing a lot of workforce units. Obviously, the drawback is the program would no longer be required to produce units at every income level. But it, like I said, it kind of recognizes mitigation's position in your housing program.
So that's where we sit with recommendations in addition to both fee and units. That's the guidance we need. Next steps will be circulating these recommendations to yourselves to see if there's anything where you go, whoa, I'm not comfortable with that. And then we'll be forwarding these to the gym and some maybe in a handout that summarizes some of the data, some of the discussions, some of the results in order to prime them. Well, actually, we'll be sitting down and discussing with them and priming them for some gym meetings in June or July. So we'll be moving this forward. It looks like everyone took a very tempered and thoughtful view of this. Nothing too extreme, but also not going backwards, but going forward. So at this point, I'm going to call for adjournment of this committee and want to say thank you. It's to be honest here, it's you guys are extremely thoughtful and considerate. So what a service you are have done for town of Jackson and the county. So we really appreciate it. So any comments before we close our fourth and final recommendation meeting?
Thank you all for the work you've done on it. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
You're supposed to say, do we get t-shirts and a party? And the answer is since I can commit the town and county to anything I want, since I'm going to say you deserve that. So
we'll go to the industrial park to the Roadhouse Brewery.
Right on. You know where Ryan lives and so on. So feel free to pick up the phone if you're like, oh my gosh. But again, thank you so much. That was hard work. So we really do appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. I know I learned a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.